Welcome to Energy Linguist, a sacred space for awakening souls ready to receive divine transmissions and the raw truth that sets them free. I am Laura Ahern, a spiritual channel and energy translator here to bring through messages from highest guidance to help you hear your inner knowing, reclaim who you are beneath the noise, and live from the truth within. Take a breath. You've found the space where remembering begins. Hello, everyone. It's Laura, the Energy Linguist here, and I am so excited to have you joining me on my first ever podcast episode for Energy Linguist, where we decode your energy, heal your patterns, and awaken your path as I receive divinely guided, channeled insight to help you illuminate what feels clouded and dark in your life. Thank you so much for being here. Today's message from Divine Guidance is really powerful because they're asking me to speak to all of you about the invaluable nature of who and what you really are. And this can be a really big thing to work through, you guys, because what you are is really not anything you believe yourself to be, at least not yet. The truth is that you've been lied to over lifetimes about what you are. And you are not at all what you've been told, what has been reflected to you, what your experiences have concluded about you. And so today, Divinity is shining light on this issue so that we can not only decode it and decipher it, but then discard what no longer serves you. So let's get directly into this channel of light information to start hearing these messages, especially because they're going to be channeling in real time as we go through this episode. So as Divine Creator speaks, what I hear here is rooted in the invaluableness of your nature. We really are not what we have been told we are. And what's interesting about this is I hear the messaging around this preconceived notion of what we believe ourselves to be. Now, those words are very intentional from Divinity, and they're very interesting because when we're talking about preconceived, right, in definition, preconceived is actually an idea or an opinion that has been formed before having the evidence for its truth or usefulness. I want you to think of that before there's evidence of truth or usefulness of the belief. Now, when they use the word notion, we're talking about a concept or a belief about something, right? This impulse and desire. And so having this preconceived notion, predetermined guidelines around what you are were created lifetimes ago. You've experienced them over the course of your lifetimes, and yet Divinity says that they were created beyond you. And so let me explain a little bit. In this messaging, Divine Guidance is telling us that we are regurgitating cycles in our life. It is this recreating, so to speak, as opposed to creating. So I'm breaking down this nuance a little bit because what Divine Guidance wants you to understand here about part of what you're experiencing yourself to be is that we often blame ourselves, right? How many of you have blamed yourself for shaming yourself? How many of you are actively shaming yourself for shaming yourself? I want your hand up because I want you to see yourself. I want you to now take that hand and please place it on your heart. And I want you to hold yourself for just a moment. Deep breath. Please understand that you are not alone in the cycle you feel so stuck in. I know it feels like this downward spiral of cycles that feels like this endless, unbreakable bond. But here today, this messaging is meant to break you free from that bondage. There is no need to shame ourselves for our past pains, our past experiences, or even when we start to come into the higher perception of the way we've been mistreating ourselves or the way we've been misseeing ourselves, literally acting as if we are something we are not. If you've read my book, The True Calling, you'll hear me use this word there. And what I call this with my clients is mis-identity. These mis-identities. It is a misunderstanding of who and what we are that has originated from the conclusions that we've made about our experiences, about our stories. And this is very interesting because what are our experiences, right? Our experiences are layered with conclusions, often high emotionally charged things where there are agreements we've made that we believe a certain way about a certain thing, even though we may not have chosen this belief for ourselves. Quite often it was passed down from our ancestors to believe a certain way about a certain thing. And then we act in alignment with it and we're shamed for it. We actually behave in the way that society says we must behave, especially as women. And then when we do, we're ostracized for it. We're shamed for it. It's devastating to our soul. It's devastating to our spirit because we're already operating from a place that is severely disconnected from our wholeness. We already know we are out of integrity with ourselves when we are following the belief of ancestors that have come before us, that have told us to feel and respond a certain way to things. So we're already painting ourselves by showing up in rejection of what we innately are. And then we show up as the thing that everybody's telling us we need to be, and we're still rejected. And so I want you to understand, a lot of this rejection is happening because those who are putting these pressures on us are in the constant rejection of themselves. They are not in the wholeness of their being or the unconditional love of themselves, or even the allowing themselves to be innately what they are. And therefore, the idea or the observing or the experiencing of you in this attempt to be what you innately are triggers them to lash out what seems to be against you, but the lashing out is against themselves. The pain we feel for the self-abandonment and the self-rejection creates these misunderstandings and mis-identities in our system, many of which are rooted in fear. The fear of not being ostracized, the fear of not being left alone, right? When you think of our ancestors and the survival in the wilderness, to be ostracized was literally to be condemned to death. And we know from the moment we are born that we rely on our caregivers for survival. We rely on both their love and their acceptance in order for us to be protected, fed, cared for. And so it's wired within our human being from an evolutionary standpoint for us to do whatever it takes to merit that love, to not just receive that love, but to be worthy of that love. And that is the biggest deceit of them all. Because when we act in accordance with this misidentity, believing that we are something other than what we are, believing that we are lacking, that there is a source from outside of us that needs to give to us in order for us to be enough, in order for us to survive, then we stay trapped in this pattern of suffering. As we move into independence in our human experience, where we become self-sufficient, it's interesting how these programs and these conditions continue to run, where we are in this constant abandonment of our own integrity in order to stay in alignment with things that are severely out of alignment with our own frequency. They are literally toxic garbage to our soul, and we continue to connect ourselves to them. And so divinity is speaking directly to you today to remind you that you do not have to be a victim to this cycle anymore. That you are not only self-sufficient, but love is not something that comes from outside of you. Love is the creator that exists within you. Your very spiritual vibration. It's what I refer to as our unique vibrational blueprint. Creation is not complete without you, because there's something so unique about your vibration that the world and this collective field in the cosmos needs in order to be whole. And when we reject that uniqueness and we reject that vibration, the world remains disjointed. It remains incomplete. And that's where the war and the suffering and the pain and the judgment becomes cycled and perpetuated. And it starts from within ourselves. Our whole life, we have been told a lie that the solution lies within us fighting the cycle. And divinity has another message for us today. What has been revealed to me is the truth of the age-old story, the oldest story known to man, which is the battle of darkness versus light. And highest guidance stepped in, and they showed me that this battle, this cycle, is what keeps us trapped. This idea that if we just fight the things that pain us, invest your very soul into them, that they will become better. And that's the lie. That's the deceiver trying to pull your energy, your vital life energy source into feeding the darkness. But there's a way out. And the way out exists within our highest consciousness, our ability to question and become curious about what is actually real within our lives. Because our experiences, they feel very real because they're rooted in emotion. And if any of you know about the brain and emotion, when we have an experience that is highly emotionally triggered, it automatically jumps past this need to practice the experience in order to get it to be stored in our long-term memory. And instead, it actually goes straight into our long-term memory. Why? Well, evolutionarily speaking, if we had a highly emotionally charged fear experience, it was imperative for our survival to remember that, right? Okay, there was a lion. I almost got eaten. I have to remember this, right? So straight into this long-term memory. And so within our experiences, our whole vision of our world, our perception of what our life has been like actually becomes very warped. Because the things that are stored dominantly within our long-term memory that seem to be the most easy to recollect are typically the things that we had a highly charged emotional experience around. Meaning it's something that typically pained us significantly. And the problem is we start to see ourselves as that experience, not as having experienced it, but actually as the experience. And we feel like we should be ashamed for not having been perfect. In my book, The True Calling, I provide the true method, which is strategic practices that actually walk us through disassembling exactly this. Looking at our experiences, looking how we've decided about ourselves around them, and encouraging us to extract the wisdom out of what we've gone through, to allow it to empower us as opposed to disempowering us. And today, divinity is inviting you into the same messaging, into understanding that within your higher consciousness, the creator that creates your life exists within you and is at your command. We direct and command creation with our intention. And intention is fed through our thoughts and emotions by what we think about and what we feel into. Masses of people around the world try to create their reality through this very electrical thought energy of the mind, this very yang energy of the masculine, of doing and thinking and strategizing and analyzing. And creation is not complete without the balance of the yin-yang energy. Yin, that vibration of emotion that also exists within the mind of our being, the mind vibration, is magnetic. It's the emotion that magnetizes the things we're thinking about into our reality. And so in order for us to truly step into being the creators of our lives, we must start to manage both that thought and that emotion and unify them. And divinity is offering you this opportunity today. When I tune into the collective field of energy as I'm channeling this message, what message I'm being told here is that we need this opening of our heart to ignite this creative energy within us that connects us to our divine will. In essence, what it's saying is that there is a creator within your human being that seeks to bring the things you truly desire and deserve into your walking, waking life. And it can only be done when you work in co-creation with divine will. And the path to allowing that to be made manifest is to open this heart energy. This is the heart energy of unconditional self-love, first and foremost. There's a really, really powerful message coming through that if you do not first receive, your well will run dry. Often, most of us are handing over that which divinity is trying to give to us before we've even allowed ourselves to experience and receive it. And this is the core of our own self-sabotage, self-rejection, and undervaluing ourselves. It's this imbalanced misconception and misidentity that I am not worthy to hold this and receive this for myself first. Another key way in which our well runs dry is that we also misunderstand what receiving means. Often, many people who seek to be spiritual leaders, who are they themselves still very imbalanced, still very run by ego, they think that receiving is in just the disconnecting of the sensual nature of being in nature or receiving a massage or being in water. And yes, those things are glorious to our divine experience of what it's like to be a spirit in human form. And yes, we should receive those experiences. However, that's a very superficial experience when it's in disconnect from the deeper part of receiving that divinity is really asking us to come into. And this deeper experience of receiving is the awakening of the divine feminine energy, this going within, turning your direction and your gaze within yourself to become inquisitive and curious about what you truly desire. To ask yourself, what do you believe is possible? What do you desire to experience? Why are you engaging in certain things? What might be in the way for you? And to truly be courageous enough to look at yourself and ask those questions for clarity of your soul. I feel so much pain and stretching in the heart chakra right now because many of you listening to this transmission are having massive heart openings. And it's opening you to the realization that determining and deciding your future has always been up to you. This awakening of your energy is the ignition of divinity within your life. You can look within yourself and challenge what you believe is possible. You're being invited to challenge what you believe, why you believe it. Ask yourself, do you really actually believe it at all? Or maybe who did you learn that thing from? Because it's so important for us to come back into our wholeness and back into integrity. with our unique vibrational blueprint, the very spirit that exists within us. That is our vital life energy. It is God within us. Quite often we experience a lot of lack of vitality in our life and chronic illness because of this disconnect that's happened within our field. If you've read my book, The True Calling, and you've explored my energy evolution formula, you'll see that I talk about our entire field of energy in 4 different sections of the most invisible vibration of our spirit, moving into the mind component, which actually is very segmented into thought and then emotions. And then that 4th component of the actual physical manifestation of physical form in our material world. Most of us are living as if these things are separate. And I speak about them separately at times because of conceptualization of being able to integrate divine wisdom into a more applicable understanding in our lives. But they're not separate. You are energy vibrating from its core. And as that energy that vibrates so quickly that it's invisible, you can't even see it, as it begins to slow its vibration, it becomes more and more dense and more visible to our experience, rising into thought, emotion, and then into our physical form. And I share this to help you understand better that if you are experiencing physical chronic unwellness in your life, whether it be physical body, emotional body, mental body, it's often because there's these parts of us that are segmented, that are operating in different vibrational frequencies, that are not unified or harmonized. And much of it has to do with the conduit of the mind, the thought and the emotion that we're talking about, that actually creates this mis-identity. It's almost like this fingerprint of our ancestors, of the past, of this regurgitated cycle of our dramas and our pains, and ironically, the things we wish to avoid. And yet we continue to cycle our energy into them. And so Divinity awakens you today to understand you are more than you ever thought you could be. They are awakening you into disassembling that old identity of the mind and to leaning into your higher mind, your highest mind, your intimate connection with the divine creator, with this higher consciousness that you hear me channeling from. You too are a part of this source. When you choose to hear this vibrationally, actually feel it in the core of the soul of your being, what happens is you're actually receiving a transmission of healing, listening to this podcast. And this in particular message, the receiving, is the receiving of truth. And it's the opening of your throat chakra, which is your capacity to choose for yourself, to choose even when you believe there is no choice. And when we choose, we engage with our freedom. There are so many times in my own path of awakening in which it felt like there was not a choice. When my young husband had a seizure out of the blue, and I called 911 and we got him to the hospital, and they diagnosed him with a brain tumor with a prognosis of 9 months to live. After we had only been married 4.5 months, 9 months, it would seem that there was no choice. The tumor was inoperable. They said we would be lucky if chemo and radiation even stopped it from growing, and that it would never get rid of it. And the only choice that the outside world had presented to us was one of complete defeat, devastation. But thankfully, within our own divine wisdom, both mine and Josh's, we discovered we did have a choice. And the choice is what we did with the experience we were handed. And though he only lived for 14 more months, I can honestly say to all of you that that was the best 14 months of our lives that we had ever spent together. More connected to God, more connected to each other. The discarding and not involving ourselves in the cycles of drama and pain. Pulling off of the darkness and leaning into the light, we laughed more. We became more ourselves than we ever were before. And we discovered what was truly precious and pure about life. And even in the experience of his death and in my darkest moments, in which I believed there was no more light, that I truly felt in my core that all lights had gone out. And I was engulfed in the darkness. It was that moment in which I discovered a light within myself that is infinite, that never goes out. A light that I wouldn't have otherwise seen if all other lights hadn't gone out. It was in that moment of the recognition of that light that I was pulled forward. And I will honestly say unwillingly pulled forward, because in that moment, I didn't want to move on. And sometimes we don't. We don't want to let our past go. We don't want to let a loved one go. We don't want to grow beyond our family or our friends. And yet we are being called. If you are here, you are being called into the creation of your soul's calling, into the embodiment of your own unique, invisible light. That when we stoke this unique, invisible blueprint of your soul, it begins to be made manifest in the material physical world in ways that you cannot even imagine from where you stand today. And me, as this channeler, transmitter, and translator for the divine with divinity, are here to remind you that this ember inside of you that may seem faint is the strongest, most powerful force in the universe, and it is yours to direct. This is the moment in which you get to choose for you. You get to choose to break generational patterns that the world has been cycling through for what feels like to our souls eternity. And you get to decide with your choice, once and for all, who you are. And when I hear them say once and for all, they literally mean for all. For all of those who come next. Set a new standard, a new norm. It's time for us to normalize boundaries, to normalize self-love, and to normalize using the word no, especially us women, in which our experiences as women, there was so much that was normalized that created that pattern they spoke on earlier, which was behaving the way we were told to and then being completely shamed and prosecuted for it. No more. Today, I hope you feel in this transmission the light and love of divinity holding and embracing you as you choose for you to start to step into an identity that serves you, to allow yourself to receive first and foremost, and to never forget that you are one with the Creator. This is Laura Hearn, the Energy Linguist, and it's been my honor. I cannot wait to be with you for our next episode. Thank you for being here, for listening with your heart, and for opening to the truth meant just for you. If this transmission resonated, I invite you to visit lauraahern.com for free resources and sacred support to help you accelerate your awakening and walk your path with more power, trust, and grace. Until next time, trust what you feel, honor what you know, and believe in your power to create something greater than you've ever imagined.